This is 3.1 conditional statements. So number at number 25. We just had a notebook check. Your notebook checks are not supposed to take you time to organize. You're just supposed to put it in your notebook. Everything has a number, okay? So this is number 25. Put your name on it. What we're going to do is, first thing we're going to do is identify the hypothesis and the conclusion from each of these sentences. So for number one, if I say, if you're an American citizen, then you have the right to vote. What is the hypothesis and what is the conclusion? We're talking about random stuff. We're talking about words today. So which part of the sentence? We have two parts. We have this part and we have this part. We have to decide which one is the hypothesis, which one is the conclusion. So is the front half? Yes. So the front part is the hypothesis. If you are an American citizen, then you have the right to vote is the conclusion. So we'll shorthand it. 2 says if a figure is a rectangle, then it has 4 sides. Which part is the hypothesis? The first part. The last part is going to be the conclusion. So in a sentence, we're going to have 2 parts. And what we're going to have to do for today is rearrange it. And then we basically are going to figure out if that statement is true or false. The last one says, if you want to be healthy, then you should eat vegetables. Same thing. The front part is the hypothesis. The back part is the conclusion. What we're going to do is we are going to go to this side part. This is kind of like your notes. I added on to this. So we're going to kind of make like a bubble around this because this is the important part. We're going to take our sentence. The original sentence that they give us has to use if and then. And they say P and Q. So whatever we're talking about, like for this one, if you're an American citizen, that's P. Then you have the right to vote would be Q. We're going to demonstrate this with a P to an arrow to Q. Super weird. This is just saying that P goes directly to Q. The converse of that would be switching the conclusion with the hypothesis. If Q, then P. So we would switch it. Just flip the sentence. Once we do all of these things, the converse, the inverse, the contrapositive, we basically need to determine if the new sentence is true or false. The inverse is saying if not P, then not Q. This is negating it or making it negative. The way that they could write this using the P and Q statement is the inverse of P. The inverse is a squiggle. So saying not P, then not Q. So it's the inverse. It is negating it, making it negative. So you have to use the word not or don't or isn't. You have to make your sentence negative. Contrapositive is flipping Q and P. So that flipping the sentence and then also making it negative. So negating Q, negating P. Biconditional is not on your EOC usually ever. Biconditional is saying if and only if something happens. So we're going to say P with a double-sided arrow, Q. We're going to use these to rewrite sentences that are given to us. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip 4 and 5. And we're going to go to 6. So it says, determine if the conditional statement is true or false. If it is false, then provide a counterexample. So if it doesn't make sense, or if we can provide a counterexample, then we have to say a counterexample. So it says, if you live in a country that borders the United States, then you must live in Canada. Is that true or false? That's false. What is the counterexample? No. What would be a counter? There's another sport. Does anybody know the other sport? So every other class besides this said another sport first. Cricket. I said the same thing. Cricket is played in England with a ball on a bat. But when I say literally, I mean 6th period said cricket before softball, 7th period said cricket first period said cricket, 2nd period. Because girls can't play baseball. I'm not really sure why, but whatever. But cricket is played in England, okay, and that involves like a ball and bat. So, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna be given a statement. We have to write the inverse, the converse, and the contrapositive. So on your EOC and even on your midterm, you don't have to type out sentences. What you're gonna have to do is it would have to be multiple choice. So you would have to pick the correct sentence. So it says, if you are a quarterback, then you play football. That is my conditional statement. They're using if and then. They're using these literal words, if and then. So they're saying P to Q. Is that statement to start with, is that statement true or false? It is true. If you're a quarterback, then you play football. That's true. This front part is P. The back part is Q. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our sentence and we're going to rearrange it. The inverse, and I made a nice new poster right there. The inverse is negating P and negating Q. I'm not switching their places. I'm keeping the sentence exactly the same, but I have to make it negative. I have to use the word not or isn't or doesn't or don't. I have to use a negative word in front of it. So if I said, if you are a quarterback, then you play football, how I could write that as an, say, if you aren't or are not a quarterback, because I made it negative in some sort of way, then you don't play football. And I'm going to kind of shorthand some stuff because I know this is annoying to write out sentences. I'm sorry. Would my new sentence, if I make it negative, I didn't switch their places, if you are not a quarterback, then you don't play football, is that a true statement or a false statement? False. That's false. Why? There's other positions. So my new sentence, even though the original one was true, because I changed it, it's false. The counterexample we're not going to write out, but because you could play a different position, that statement is false. Okay. The converse, if you look at our original notes, is taking the original statement and switching their places. So I'm going to say from Q to P. So I'm taking the back half, I'm taking the conclusion, and I'm switching it with the hypothesis. So I'm switching their places. I have to still use the words if and then. So instead of saying if you are a quarterback, then you play football, I'm going to say if you play football, then you are a quarterback. Same thing. Is that new statement true or is it false? False. Same reasoning, because you could play a different position. So try to write the contrapositive. The contrapositive we wrote, and hopefully you wrote the little side things or else you have no idea what I'm talking about. The contrapositive, we're negating Q and we're negating P. So we're flipping the sentence and we're making it negative. And you're always going back to the original. So your original is if you are a quarterback, then you play football. You're going to switch their places and make it negative. So it's like English class today. So if you are bad at math, you're probably happy today. So what would be my new sentence? Perfect. So if you don't play football, then you're not a quarterback. Is that true or false? That's true. Because is there any other sport that has a quarterback position? At least not that I know of. I don't know. I don't think so. So that's a true statement. Now what we're going to do is we have 10, last one we're doing together, and then you guys can finish your tests or you can work on the backside of this. Pianists, which is somebody that plays piano. Pianist is a piano person. Are musicians. Notice that they did not use the proper format. It should be if P, then Q. So they gave me a sentence. The first thing I need to do is write the initial conditional statement using the words if and then. So the conditional is always usually given, but in this case, it says pianists are musicians. So how could I change this simple sentence into a conditional statement using the words if with the comma and then? Perfect. If you are a pianist, then you are a musician. And it doesn't have to be an exact writing like mine. Obviously, you can write sentences different. So now we're going to take a second, try to write the inverse of the conditional, try to write the converse and the contrapositive. This will definitely be one of the notes I check next binder check because I know it's like lots of writing. It's probably super annoying. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, take the test. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Whatever. Okay, so for the inverse, you should have wrote something like if you're not a pianist, then you're not a musician. The converse is just flipping the statement. If you're a musician, then you're a pianist. The contrapositive is switching their places and negating it or making it negative. So if you're not a musician, then you're not a pianist. We have to go back and we're going to decide if these statements are true or false. So if I go back to the conditional statement, the original that I wrote, if you're a pianist, then you're a musician, would that be true or false? True. The inverse that we said is if you're not a pianist, then you're not a musician. That's false because I could play the violin, I could play the drums, I could play guitar, I could play something, but yeah, that. So you could play something else. The converse, if you're a musician, then you're a pianist. That's also false because same reasoning. I can play a different thing. Contrapositive, if you're not a musician, then you're not a pianist. True. So on the back side of this is other ones that you can work on. You can leave this paper out if you want, if you're working on your test, because this is not going to help you at all with your test because it's just a bunch of words. So for people who need to work on their test, I'm going to pass out the